Look at the object closest to your right hand: the phone, the coffee mug, the lamp, the book. Now ask yourself a question that very few people in the modern world are equipped to answer. Where did it come from? Not the store where you bought it, but the actual origin, the raw material, the factory where it was assembled, the port it traveled through, the truck that moved it, the warehouse that stored it, second truck that moved it again, the distribution center that sorted it, the third truck that brought it to the shelf. What you are holding is not a simple object. It is a monument to coordination, a physical manifestation of a global machine so complex that no single human being on Earth understands it entirely. We call this machine the supply chain, and we have been treating it for the last 50 years as though it were a force of nature, as reliable as gravity, as constant as the sunrise. We built our cities, our economies, and our lives on the assumption that this machine would always run. We optimized for efficiency above all else. We decided that holding inventory in a warehouse was a waste of capital, so we shifted to just-in-time delivery, where parts arrive at the factory exactly when they are needed, where products land on the shelf precisely as the customer reaches for them. We stripped the slack out of the system. We made it lean. We made it fast. And in doing so, we made it brittle. The danger we are facing is not a repeat of the pandemic toilet paper shortage. That was a ripple, a momentary disruption that exposed the fragility of the system but did not break it. The danger we are facing now is structural, cumulative, and largely invisible to the average person. It is the result of years of compounding vulnerabilities, of deferred maintenance on the machine, of political decisions that prioritize the appearance of prosperity over the reality of resilience. We are looking at a scenario where the machine does not just hiccup, but where it seizes, where the parts do not arrive just in time, but just too late, where the shelves go empty not for a week, but for months, where the just-in-time model reveals its dark secret that is also just in case never. We have built a civilization on the thinnest possible margin of error, and we have run out of margin. To understand what is coming, you have to understand the physics of a system that has no physical presence in your daily life. The supply chain is not a thing you can visit. It is a web of relationships, of contracts, of shipping lanes, of fuel prices, of labor negotiations, of computer algorithms, of geopolitical tensions. It is a dynamic system, and like all dynamic systems, it has thresholds. Push it too hard, stretch it too thin, load it too heavy, and it will not break slowly. It will break suddenly. This is the principle of nonlinearity. A bridge does not show visible signs of distress for years and then gently sag into the river. It stands, and it stands, and it stands, and then, with the addition of one extra truck, one gust of wind, 1 degree of temperature change, it collapses. The supply chain is that bridge. We have been adding trucks for decades. The wind is picking up, and the temperature is changing faster than the engineers predicted. The analysis begins with the most fundamental input of all: energy. Every single object in the modern world is a frozen block of energy. The energy required to mine the ore, to smelt the metal, to mold the plastic, to run the assembly line, to power the data center, to fuel the ship, to drive the truck. When energy prices are stable and predictable, the cost of moving a container from Shanghai to Los Angeles is a manageable line item. When energy prices become volatile, when they spike, when they become unpredictable, the entire equation breaks. The shipping companies cannot simply raise their rates overnight. They are locked into contracts. They have fuel surcharges, yes, but those surcharges lag behind the spot price of oil. When the gap between the cost of fuel and the revenue from shipping widens too far, the shipping company has a choice: lose money on every voyage or slow down. And slowing down means the containers arrive late. But the system is not designed for late. The factories are not designed for late. The warehouses are not designed for late. The retailers are not designed for late. Late cascades. Late multiplies. Late multiplies the new normal, and then late becomes too late. This is not speculation. This is marine engineering and transport economics. Every container ship burns bunker fuel. Bunker fuel is a waste product of the refining process. When refineries run less crude because of geopolitical instability, because of production cuts, because of refineries closing due to age or regulation, the supply of bunker fuel tightens. The ships must compete for a dwindling resource. The ships that cannot secure fuel do not sail. The goods that are on those ships do not arrive. The factories that depend on those goods stop running. The people who work in those factories stop earning paychecks. The cycle feeds on itself. But the energy problem is only the first layer. The second layer is labor, and the misunderstanding here is profound. The public narrative often frames labor shortages as a simple matter of people not wanting to work or of wages being too low. That is a surface-level analysis that misses the structural reality. The reality is that the workforce required to run the global supply chain is not a generic pool of interchangeable workers. It is a highly specialized, highly trained, highly experienced population of individuals who operate complex machinery, who navigate legal frameworks, who manage logistics software, who inspect cargo, who certify safety. These are not jobs you can fill with a sign on the door that says "now hiring." A longshoreman who operates a crane that unloads a container ship requires years of training and certification. A truck driver who hauls hazardous materials requires specific endorsements and a record of safe operation. A customs broker who clears goods through ports requires deep knowledge of a constantly changing regulatory landscape. When these workers retire, and they are retiring in record numbers, there is no pipeline to replace them. The average age of a longshoreman on the west coast of the United States is over 50. The average age of an over-the-road truck driver is over 50. The average age of a skilled machinist in the manufacturing sector is over 50. We are facing a demographic cliff, a mass exodus of institutional knowledge that cannot be replaced by automation or by enthusiastic amateurs. The robots are not coming to save us. The automated ports that were supposed to run with minimal human intervention are still plagued by breakdowns, by software glitches, by the simple reality that a container falling off a crane is a catastrophe that requires human judgment to prevent. The technology is not there yet. It may never be there. And in the meantime, the humans are leaving. This is where the hidden science of complex systems enters the picture. There is a principle in ecology called the redundancy hypothesis. It states that ecosystems with high biodiversity are more resilient to disturbance because if one species fails, another can fill its role. The supply chain, as we have built it, has almost zero redundancy. It has maximum efficiency. It has maximum specialization. It has minimum biodiversity. We have created a monoculture of logistics. One type of port, one type of ship, one type of truck, one type of fuel, one type of labor. When a pathogen attacks a monoculture crop, the entire field dies. When a disruption attacks the supply chain monoculture, the entire system falters. We've seen this with the microchip shortage. The entire world depended on a handful of fabrication plants in Taiwan. A drought, a pandemic, a geopolitical tension, and suddenly cars cannot be built, phones cannot be shipped, medical devices cannot be manufactured. That was one crop in the field. There are many more crops that have not yet failed. The fertilizer supply, the rare earth minerals, the pharmaceutical ingredients, the ball bearings, the things you have never thought about, the components that are invisible to you are the ones that will bring the machine to a halt. And when that happens, the misunderstanding will be that it was caused by one thing, one event, one headline. It will not be. It will be caused by the accumulated brittleness of decades of optimization. It will be the extra truck on the bridge. The misunderstanding deepens when we examine the geography of where things are made. There is a widespread belief that globalization has spread manufacturing around the world, diversifying production and reducing risk. The truth is the opposite. Globalization has concentrated production into fewer and fewer hands, driven by the relentless logic of economies of scale. It is cheaper to build one massive factory that supplies the entire world than it is to build 10 smaller factories on different continents. It is cheaper to centralize warehousing in a single regional hub than it is to maintain distributed inventory. It is cheaper to run one massive container ship than it is to run several smaller ones. Cheap, cheap, cheap. We optimize for cheap, and in doing so, we created a system where a flood in Thailand can shut down the global supply of hard disk drives. A strike in a single port on the West Coast can idle factories in the Midwest. A fire in a chemical plant in Germany can stop pharmaceutical production in India. We have created a network where the nodes are so large, so critical, so singular, that the failure of any one node threatens the entire network. This is not a theoretical risk. This is network theory. This is the mathematics of connectivity. When you have a scale-free network, a network where a few hubs handle the vast majority of traffic, the system is robust against random failures, but catastrophically vulnerable to targeted attacks or concentrated disruptions. The pandemic was a random failure, a virus that attacked everywhere at once. The next disruption will not be random. It will be targeted by nature itself, by the concentration of production in floodplains, in earthquake zones, in regions prone to drought, in political hotspots. The evidence is already accumulating, but it is accumulating in the form of data that does not make the evening news. Freight rates that remain elevated not because of temporary spikes, but because of structural changes in the shipping industry. Vessel capacity that is constrained not by demand, but by the simple physical reality that there are not enough ships to move the world's goods, and building a new ship takes years. Container shortages that ripple across the globe because the boxes are stuck in the wrong places, waiting for ships that are delayed, waiting for trucks that are not there, waiting for labor that has retired. The cost of shipping a container from Asia to Europe has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. It has settled at a new, higher baseline. That cost is invisible to the consumer. For now, it is absorbed by the importer, by the distributor, by the retailer, but it accumulates, it compounds, it eventually appears on the price tag, and when it appears on the price tag, it changes behavior. People buy less, people buy differently, people delay purchases, and that change in behavior sends a signal back up the supply chain, a signal that says reduce production, cancel orders, lay off workers. The signal travels fast. The adjustment takes time. And in that gap between the signal and the adjustment, the system oscillates. It swings from shortage to surplus and back again. These oscillations, these bullwhip effects, are amplified with every step they travel. A small change in consumer demand becomes a massive swing in factory orders. A small surplus at the retail level becomes a mountain of unsold inventory at the port. A small shortage at the factory becomes a complete halt in production. The system overcorrects. It always overcorrects. And the people who live inside the system, the workers, the small business owners, the farmers, they are the ones who bear the whiplash. The survival implications of this are not abstract. They are immediate and personal. The assumption that you will always be able to walk into a store and buy what you need when you need it is an assumption based on a historical anomaly. It is based on the last 70 years of relative stability, of cheap energy, of open trade routes, of predictable labor markets. That anomaly is ending. The question is not whether the system will fail. The question is where the failures will occur, how long they will last, and how deep they will cut. For the individual, for the family, for the community, the implications are about the essentials: food, water, medicine, fuel, fuel. These are the categories where the margins are thinnest and the consequences of absence are most severe. The food supply chain is a marvel of efficiency. It is also a marvel of fragility. Most grocery stores operate with less than 3 days of inventory on the shelves. 3 days. Behind the store in the distribution center, there might be another week. Behind the distribution center in the warehouses, there might be another month. But that inventory is not static. It is constantly moving, constantly being replenished by trucks that are constantly running, by warehouses that are constantly receiving, by ships that are constantly sailing. Interrupt the trucks, interrupt the warehouses, interrupt the ships, and the 3 days disappear. The shelves go empty. The just-in-time model becomes just out of luck. The hidden science here is the science of perishability and storage. We have engineered our food system to assume continuous refrigeration from farm to table. The cold chain is a marvel of engineering, a continuous thread of temperature control that keeps perishable food safe from the moment it is harvested to the moment it is purchased. Break that thread, even for a few hours, and the food is compromised. A power outage at a distribution center, a fuel shortage that idles refrigerated trucks, a port strike that leaves containers sitting on the dock in the sun, and the losses cascade. The food does not just stop moving, it rots, it spoils. It spells liability, a health hazard, a disposal problem. The cold chain is one of the most energy-intensive, most precisely timed, most vulnerable components of the entire supply chain, and it is largely invisible. You do not see the refrigeration units. You do not think about the diesel that powers them. You do not consider the maintenance schedules, the backup generators, the skilled technicians who keep them running. You just see the milk in the cooler, the meat in the case, the frozen vegetables in the aisle. When the cold chain breaks, you see empty shelves and signs limiting purchases. But by then, it is too late. The food is already gone, or it is already unsafe, or it is already stranded hundreds of miles away, spoiling in a trailer that cannot move. The escalation is already underway. It is not a single event that you will see on the news. It is a slow-motion collapse of margins, a gradual thinning of the buffer that protects you from the underlying reality of scarcity. The drought in the agricultural heartland that reduces crop yields, the war that cuts off fertilizer exports, the trade dispute that raises tariffs on essential goods, the cyber attack that shuts down a pipeline, the bankruptcy of a major trucking company. These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms. They are the early warning signs that the system is approaching its threshold. And the threshold is not a line that you cross and then notice. The threshold is the point where the system loses its ability to recover, where the disruptions compound faster than the repairs can be made, where the just-in-time model becomes just-in-never. We are watching the bridge sway in the wind. We are counting the trucks as they roll across. And we are pretending, because it is comfortable to pretend, that the engineers knew what they were doing, that the margin of safety was sufficient, that the bridge will hold. The engineers did know what they were doing. They designed the bridge for a certain load, a certain wind speed, a certain temperature range. We are the ones who ignored the specifications. We are the ones who added the trucks. We are the ones who built the skyscrapers on the floodplain. We are the ones who will be standing on the bridge when it falls.